Imagine trying to piece a community back together after everything's been torn apart by exile. Your home city, your center of life, it's basically in ruins. Where do you even start?
It's a massive task, isn't it? You've got to know who's coming back, what role they play, and crucially, how you restart the very core of your identity, your worship.
Exactly. And that's precisely what we get a fascinating glimpse into in 1 Chronicles chapter 9. It gives this almost, well, administrative view of who came back to Jerusalem right after the exile in Babylon.
And the text itself tells us why they were exiled, their unfaithfulness. So it stands to reason, really, that the absolute first priority on returning is restoring that divine connection focused on the temple, the house of God.
Yeah, makes sense.
So this chapter, it's like a snapshot of the people needed to make that happen.
Okay, so let's dig into that. The chapter kicks off by listing the first groups to resettle. It names Israelites, priests, Levites, and temple servants. These are the folks getting their property back, setting up in their towns first.
And that grouping is important, isn't it? Right away, the priests, Levites, temple servants, the religious and administrative core are listed right there with the general population.
It shows a clear focus.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It wasn't just random people showing up.
Yeah.
These functional groups, essential for worship and community life, were right there at the start.
And then the focus zooms in specifically on Jerusalem. Who are the people settling right there in the capital?
Well, the text points mainly to people from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, which you'd expect for the former southern kingdom's capital.
Right.
But interestingly, it also mentions people from Ephraim and Manasseh.
Oh, so from the northern tribes, too.
Yeah, remnants who seem to have integrated back into Jerusalem. It suggests maybe not just a purely Judah and Benjamin return, but perhaps a hope for a wider Israelite identity being reformed there.
Even if the numbers were smaller from the north, that's quite significant.
It hints at something bigger, yeah.
And the lists get really specific about numbers, particularly for the heads of families in Jerusalem. We've got 690 from Judah.
And 956 from Benjamin. These are the heads of households, the family leaders.
Gives you a sense of the initial scale, doesn't it? Just over 1,600 family heads from those two main tribes.
Yeah, it's not a massive flood of people, but it's that foundational group. Think about trying to rebuild a ruined city with that core. A real challenge.
And it names some of them, too, which makes it feel more real, like Uttai from Judah, Salu from Benjamin. Real people tasked with this huge job.
Exactly. Then the focus shifts to the priests. And here, the numbers. Well, they jump up quite a bit.
They really do. It lists 100 and 760 priests who were heads of families, and they're described as able men responsible for ministering in the house of God.
That number, it's almost as many as the Judah and Benjamin leaders combined right there in Jerusalem.
Oh.
It just screams how central restoring temple worship was. More priests than leading laymen from the main tribes. Their job was in the house of God. It was critical for getting the daily rituals going again.
And again, we get names. Jediah, Jehoiarib, Jechin, and Azariah, son of Hilkiah, who's called the official in charge of the house of God.
Adiah Masai. It's like reading the staff list, isn't it? The key people needed to get the spiritual heart of the nation beating again. These lists aren't just about who your ancestors were. They're about who was doing the work right then.
That really comes through with the Levites, too. It lists some names like Shemaiah, Mattaniah, Obadiah, but it's the detail about their jobs, their roles related to the temple that's striking.
Absolutely. The Levites had this incredible range of duties. They were kind of the essential support crew for the priests and the whole temple operation.
And the section on the gatekeepers gets a lot of attention. Seems like that was a really important role.
Oh, definitely not just someone opening a door. The gatekeepers were fundamental.
Yeah.
Security, order, maintaining the sanctity of the whole temple area. That was on them. Guarding the entrances, the thresholds.
Controlling access.
Precisely. Making sure the sacred space stayed sacred.
And it names some key figures, like Shallum, he's called the chief, and Akub, Talmon, Ahiman. Shallum was at the king's gate on the east side.
And notice their lineage Korahites. That's significant. The Korahites were a Levite family line known for generations for this exact role, guarding sacred spaces going way back to the tent of meeting.
Ah. Okay.
So mentioning that connects their current job directly back to this long history of trusted service. It gives it weight.
The text even emphasizes that, mentioning Phinehas, son of Eleazar, being in charge earlier and the Lord was with him. It really elevates the job beyond just security.
It does. It calls it a position of trust. And it wasn't something they just made up after the exile. It says their duties were assigned way back by David and Samuel the seer.
Foundational figures, so this role had deep roots.
Deep roots and serious responsibility. It wasn't just about showing up for your shift.
The numbers are there too. 212 men chosen as gatekeepers, registered by genealogy in their villages.
And they had a whole system worked out. Stationed on all four sides, east, west, north, south. Some lived nearby, but others came in from their villages for 7-day stints.
A coordinated effort.
Yeah, involving people from Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. But then there's this inner circle, the four principal gatekeepers. Also Levites.
What was special about them?
Well, they had an even higher level of trust. They were responsible for the rooms and, crucially, the treasuries inside the house of God.
So not just the outer gates, but safeguarding the valuables.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
sacred items, the contributions, everything valuable stored there. And get this detail. They would spend the night stationed around the house of God. They had to guard it constantly.
No, overnight duty.
And they had charged the key for opening it each morning.
The key.
The key. Think about that responsibility. The entire daily operation of the temple, the start of worship, depended on these four guys guarding through the night and having that key ready at dawn.
That's incredible. It speaks volumes about integrity, doesn't it? Faithfulness in the dark, literally holding the key to the community's access to God.
It's such a powerful image. Humble work in one sense, but absolutely essential and requiring immense trust.
So, gatekeeping. Way more than just standing guard. It's logistics, rotations, high security for treasuries, overnight vigilance, and holding that symbolic, practical key.
Couldn't put it better. And the chapter keeps going, listing other vital roles. It shows just how many different tasks were needed.
Like, some people were in charge of the articles used in the temple service, the vessels and tools.
Counting them out, counting them back in, making sure nothing went missing, everything handled properly. Accountability.
Others looked after the furnishings, the sanctuary articles generally, just keeping the place and its objects maintained.
Yeah, the upkeep. And then it gets into the supplies, the raw materials needed.
Right, the flour and wine and the oil, incense and spices,
Yeah.
all the stuff needed for the offerings and rituals.
And who handled that? Well, it says some priests mix the spices. That sounds like a specialized skill, doesn't it? Knowing the right recipes, the sacred blends.
Probably quite precise. And then there's a specific Levite named Mattithiah, a Korahite again.
Ah, yes.
He was responsible for baking the offering bread.
Baking bread, another specific task assigned. And then it mentions Kohathite Levite brothers, preparing the bread set out on the table every Sabbath.
The showbread.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Kohathites, another major Levite family, they were historically the ones who carried the most sacred objects, like the Ark. So having them prepare the showbread connects back to that legacy of handling holy things.
These details, baking bread, mixing spices, it shows that every job, no matter how practical it seems, was vital for the temple to function properly, and it was all carefully assigned and recorded.
It wasn't just about the big ceremonies people saw. It was the meticulous behind-the-scenes work that made it all possible.
And then there were the musicians. They seem to have had a unique status.
They did. The heads of Levite families who were musicians, they stayed in special temple rooms and were exempt from other duties
Exempt. Why?
because, the text says, they were responsible for the work day and night.
Day and night, what does that imply? Constant music.
Maybe constant shifts of praise or music for prayer vigils or just continuous readiness and practice. Whatever it was, their musical role was considered so important, so demanding, that it required their full attention, 247 availability, freeing them from other tasks.
It really highlights how important music was in restoring that atmosphere of worship.
Absolutely. Integral to the life of the temple.
So, okay, looking at all this, the returnee lists, the priests, the super detailed roles for gatekeepers, the support staff managing supplies, baking, spices, the full-time musicians, what does this intricate picture tell us about this community's priorities as they resettled?
Well, it paints a very clear picture, doesn't it? The overwhelming priority was rebuilding and meticulously maintaining their religious life centered on the house of God. Everything revolved around its proper function, its security, its staffing.
These lists feel less like just names and numbers and more like a blueprint for devotion.
Exactly. They show a deep commitment to restoring that relationship with God, rebuilding their identity through organized, structured worship. It wasn't haphazard.
And you see the importance of lineage, right? Not just for knowing who's who, but for assigning specific roles, especially in the temple service. It conferred legitimacy.
Yes, lineage was key, and it points to a need for highly organized worship, specific people doing specific jobs. And that focus on the gatekeepers, wow, it underscores the need for security and controlled access to the sacred.
Protecting the holy space and everything in it.
Right. Documenting all this, down to the key holder and the spice mixer, it was crucial for rebuilding their religious and social identity after the chaos of exile. They weren't just putting up walls, they were carefully restarting the engine of their spiritual life.
Now, the chapter doesn't just stop with Jerusalem temple stuff, does it? It kind of shifts gears slightly towards the end.
It does, yeah. It transitions into some broader genealogies, starting with someone named Jeel, the father of Gibeon.
Giving a wider context.
Exactly. It connects these people rebuilding Jerusalem back into the larger story of Israel. It traces lines back to earlier figures, including King Saul and his descendants, Jonathan, Merbal, Micah.
So, linking the present back to the past.
Precisely. And it mentions other families too, like Azel's descendants, including these broader family trees alongside the very practical lists of who's doing what in Jerusalem.
It shows both things are important, the immediate task and the long view.
I think so.
Yeah.
While the focus was rebuilding the temple and the city, they didn't forget the importance of maintaining the records of their history, their tribal connections, the whole national story. It grounds the present work in their ongoing identity. It's about who they are historically, as well as who's serving now.
Okay. So, wrapping up this deep dive into First Chronicles 9, we've really seen this incredibly detailed account of the people who returned to Jerusalem. Not just names, but vital roles, specific responsibilities, especially focused on the house of God.
It definitely highlights what mattered most to them after exile. Organization, lineage, and just this immense dedication to getting worship life back on track, the very thing their earlier unfaithfulness had disrupted.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Consider the incredible effort they put into remembering and writing down these specific names, these families, these precise jobs, right down to who baked the bread or held the key.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about a community that's rebuilding from devastation? That they value not just the big picture, but the lineage, the structure, even the seemingly small hidden tasks needed to keep their sacred center going. What can we learn about their deepest values from the details they chose so carefully to preserve?